All right, and we are live. So I just got the notification on my phone, I believe. Yes, I did just get the notification on YouTube. So I
That's
am.
interesting. You have.
Yeah.
Oh,
What?
well, good. Interesting. You have a jar in your, to your, I guess it would be your left, your right, your other left. All I can see in the frame is you in a jar.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh, this?
yeah, yeah. You
This?
should leave it there. It's of some interest actually. Just leave it
They're
there.
pork rinds.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, yeah. Leave it there because that's interesting to have it there.
Okay, I'm just gonna check the sound really quick on my phone. Really? Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, so that check was
All right.
easy. So just figured I'd put it out there. Why not mention it here? Everybody, if you're here and watching, welcome to Digression from the Theme, the podcast where we cannot stay on topic for longer than 2 minutes. So expect
Right.
at
Right.
least 30 changes in subject. That's a
At least, although don't count because it could be more or less than that. We
no.
don't guarantee it one way or the other.
We'll start counting eventually, and we'll probably put a little score ticker up there. But
That's a great idea.
I
Let's
think
do
that would be pretty funny.
Let's see how many minutes we can spend on counting down or counting up. Anyway, that's
We'll waste half the time counting.
we could. It's never a waste. There is no waste of time.
Not on the internet nowadays.
There is no spoon. Speaking of the Matrix,
What about the Matrix? Are we on to that?
I said there is no. I said there is no spoon, and then I said anyway.
Yeah, but okay. So I did want to share with you. Now, usually I would keep this to one of our morning business calls, but I checked Amazon today and the book Free Marketing here, just to mention the novel. And Amazon has 18 hardcovers in stock, and they have more on the way. So Amazon at this point has ordered at least 30.
Cool.
So that's nice to know.
We just need a few
show.
few zeros after that. If we could get 3 or 4 zeros after that, that'd be great. But we'll take it one step at a time.
Oh yeah, any amount is good for now. It's
Absolutely.
So like I said, welcome to the podcast. But we don't have anything really on docket for today. Usually we would have some general sort of points to make up, but we've both been busy. I've been spending more time during the day hanging out with my son, so my mind hasn't been as on politics and things like that. But I think that's a good thing because politics might be a little too inflammatory for the switch to YouTube. It does say episode. It does say episode 1. We have done about 13 podcasts previously on Twitch, but the platform didn't seem right for us just at this point because we don't really care to market it. So at this point, I thought it was better to just go with the sort of VOD category, and we're live streaming it, but it'll save. So
Yeah, we like that. We absolutely like that.
yes, that way we can be remembered. But I did just get done watching episode 8 of Rings of Power. And I don't hate it, but I feel like something is going to be very dramatically wrong with the way the whole thing plays out. In general, I disagree with a lot of the decisions they've made in terms of the lore. But I don't think it's damagingly bad as a show. It just isn't. It isn't my Tolkien. I'll put it that way.
Right.
And on the opposite end of the spectrum, House of the Dragon is spectacular. I love it. I finished the season yesterday, and you haven't, so I won't go too into
No
depth
worries.
of anything that happens in sort of the latter half. I'm not sure where you are.
Well, I've decided what I'm going to do is I've been cutting one back from one to the other just to see how confused I can get about plots. So I watch one and then I alternate to the other.
I mean, at least
I'm
they're
thinking-
they're different enough that it's.
They are different enough, but I actually have them running at the same time, and I do 5 minutes and then 5 minutes, and because I find that makes it quite interesting. It's a whole different experience you never really get into either one plot, except that you keep wondering about whether they're going to find the Red Witch buried with a couple of rings in her hands. I don't know. I just don't know where it's going to go. So you like the one, and the other one is tolerable. Not everybody on the planet has actually read the Silmarillion. I can say I read it a long, long time ago. I think right after it was published. I'm old enough to have read that early in its publication, and I found it a bit confusing. I mean, I read the 4 books when I was a teenager, and I read the Silmarillion probably when I was 19 or 20, and it's because it's different, right? It's more like a chronicling of source materials,
Yeah, it
than
is.
anything else,
It's
right?
an encyclopedia, really,
Yeah.
so it's all very disjointed. But the thing is that the lore isn't all in the Silmarillion. So
Right.
there's the unfinished tales, there's the children of Hurin, there's all the different appendices and just the information that's scattered between a lot of his unfinished work, and that's problematic in terms of the show because they don't own all the rights. Essentially, I think what they own the rights to is the appendices. I don't think they own the rights to the Silmarillion.
Oh, that's interesting.
So that being the case, they can't really fully tell the story of Morgoth or the Valar or the kinslaying of the elves that ended up with Galadriel and all them being banished to Middle Earth again. Also, the show neglects the fact that elves are from Middle Earth. It's a return to Middle Earth. It's not like, ooh, we were born with the Valar, and now we're heading over to fight Sauron. That's not really the way it went. The elves were killing each other, and so some of them went on a land bridge before the world was flooded. And it has me curious. So we'll see where it goes, right? I'm not sure, lore-wise, if they even can stick to the lore at this point, or how hard they're going to try. But just one quick example, in Rings of Power, right? Have you gotten to the twist? Spoiler warning.
I can't say as I have.
Have you so if you've watched episode 8,
Yeah.
it's actually at the beginning of episode 9.
Okay, so
It's before the opening, credit scene.
Oh, so I'm pretty sure I have not seen it.
Okay, well, you probably should have seen it coming. Honestly, I called it out
Yeah.
in episode 4.
Right.
So spoiler warning for anybody watching: the old dude who looks like Gandalf is not Gandalf. It's Sauron.
Right.
So, I called that because Gandalf doesn't show up for another 1,300 years, or something like that. It's a while.
Yeah, I didn't expect to see him at all.
Yeah, and then they literally cast a dude who looks like a young Gandalf, a younger Gandalf, which for one doesn't really make a lot of sense because he was always an old dude. So there wouldn't be a reason for him to be younger if it was Gandalf. But it's not Gandalf. It's Sauron. And you sort of get that vibe when he starts doing stuff and it starts hurting people. Because Gandalf doesn't use his power like that. And he also came with a purpose. So the problem is that I'm pretty sure Sauron should be in Numenor right now. So all this political scheming is going on, right, in Numenor, and they're like, oh, the queen's gone, and now she's hurt in Middle Earth, and they're gonna go back. And I'm sure they're gonna get back, and they're gonna be like, oh no, everybody's a traitor. And that canonically is right, is that Numenor was divided. And a bunch of people got convinced. Here's the problem: they got convinced by Sauron. Here it seems to be their own designs. The humans are just bad; they're greedy.
Mm-hmm.
But Numenorians are supposed to sort of be above that. But Sauron's capable of sort of converting them and corrupting them. That's his deal. He corrupts things, so it made sense. But the Numenorians are supposed to be I think they're maybe they're not partly elvish, but they've got longer life. They're stronger. Their bloodlines are pure, something like that. And then a lot of them decide, oh, we're going to go attack the Valar. We're gonna sail west to the Undying Lands, and we're gonna attack the Valar. And then, legitimately, Eru Iluvatar, who's God, decides, hey, that's a big no-no, so he sinks Numenor. Now, that's a possible spoiler warning for episode 9 or 10 that I have not seen, because that might still happen. And then the survivors from Numenor are the ones who then sail to found Gondor and all that. So the problem is that Sauron isn't there to make them evil. So they're just coming about being evil on their own right. And also the fact that Galadriel is like endlessly hunting Sauron is problematic, because they're supposed to think he's dead. If they know he's not dead, they would be on their guard a little bit, right? And they seem to be.
Yeah, there's sort of a disconnect there, isn't there? Because she's convinced, but not everybody is.
Yeah.
You know, the early episodes, I mean, make that pretty clear. She's seen some things, like that forge she found that had the symbol of, that funny, almost eye-like symbol on it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been part of it. That's part of the reason that she was sort of looked down upon at some point, that she was fighting, last year's war. And in fact, everybody else is wrong. She's the one who's right.
But then they go into a really confusing direction where they like send her away to the Undying Lands, but then they acknowledge that she's right.
Yeah.
It's like they're like, oh yeah, no, she's right. The bad guy's here. But the worst thing would be if she actually found him. Ugh. And then it's like, okay. And then they try to pay that off by making it so that when she does find him, oh no, everything goes wrong. Well, she never actually found him. She found some dude who works for him. And then she was an idiot and didn't inspect the object. That it's like, oh, they have this evil object that seems really important, and she's just got it wrapped in a cloth for like 4 days while she has this dude in the stable and she's just talking to him. It's like, oh, unwrap the thing. You gave the bad guy 4 days head start to freaking go plug the key into the dam that then flooded Mount Doom, and that caused a volcanic eruption. It seems odd. Like, okay, so if you poured water onto a volcano, on the top, it would make rock, right? And it might cause an explosion. But wouldn't it be like a steam explosion, not a lava explosion?
Well,
I'm curious. This is a question.
Well, a lot of the explosive power from volcanoes is steam and the release of gas. In theory, you could set up an explosion, but it would be down the line. So if you had a lava dome that was rising, and you capped it off by pouring water on it and cooling the top of it, the pressure would build up underneath that cap and would blow it. But I don't think. Well, I suppose the steam would have to go someplace. But I presume if it's flowing in there, that there's something. I mean, is the volcano open? If it's open, then there's a place for the steam to go.
Well, so the top wasn't open, but they had to feed water in through a system of trenches that they dug, which means there is a place for the pressure to go. It would feed back.
Yeah, that's what I would think too. But I don't think it would be explosive to the extent that it would blow the top of the mountain.
That went full Pompeii. It cooked the sky.
Yeah.
Which, you know what? That's also sort of a weird thing, is that smoke is magical. It's not ordinary volcanic smoke.
But it's Mount Doom smoke.
Yeah, it's like this royal of living smoke that goes out in front of the hosts of Mordor. He controls it. It's not just, oh, the sky is darker. It's a controllable force, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to actually use it.
Right. Well, that makes some sense.
Eh,
Um, yeah, I don't know. Without getting in too much into volcanology, uh,
Hey,
some
volcanology's cool.
some lavas are not explosive. The volcanoes on Hawaii, because of the type of lava they have, they're not explosive. They
Yeah.
they just it's this thick, gooey, with with not a lot of gas in it, not a lot of water in it as well, and as a result, it just oozes out slowly, it just keeps coming, but it doesn't explode, as opposed to the Pompeii or Krakatoa or some of these others that are crazy explosive because they have different kind of lava.
Yeah.
In any case, so
Well,
interesting.
at any rate, I think it does seem like the the show might be heading for Numenor sinking as an idea.
Uh, mhm.
Um, and I don't even know if they can use the name Eru Iluvatar, to be honest, because that's a Silmarillion name. So if they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion, they can't mention God by name. I don't know how much they can talk about the Valar. Also, I was happy about something, okay? Which is that I don't think the tall white lady with white hair and a staff is Saruman. I
Oh
was
yeah.
really scared.
Yeah.
I was like, oh god, that better not be Saruman. That they better not have turned him into some weird mid-30s white lady with white eyes. I was like,
Well,
that's yikes.
well, maybe Saruman is gender fluid.
So here, this is something maybe a little bit inflammatory, but I'd like to give my take on it as a writer, which is diversity hires in film. I think they're very problematic, and it is not that I haven't. I wouldn't have any problem at all if literally every single person in any given IP was a person of color. They don't need to be white. They just need to be good, right? And the thing is, for me, as long as they're not written from the jump with the position of they're meant to be a diversity hire. So if you write a character for the purpose of being a diversity hire, it's not a character, it is a checklist point. You have a list of social justice points that you need to tick all of them off. So, okay, let's add a black guy. That'll fit. Let's add a black girl. Let's add a gay dude. Let's add all these things. And it's like, it would be perfectly functional if you cast these people for the reasons of their talent, or you cast them because in universe, right? Canonically, it makes sense to cast that person. So, okay, let me just give you a quick example here. If you have, let's say you have a movie about an expedition to the middle of the jungle, right? What would people say if all the people coming to the jungle, right? Let's say the majority of the cast was all black dudes, but they're supposed to be from Spain. They're all really dark-skinned guys, but they're from Spain, apparently, in universe. And then everybody in the jungle, maybe there aren't that many of them, but they're all really white. That sounds problematic, doesn't it?
Well,
It doesn't make any sense in universe.
no,
So,
it's true.
so
That's true.
character casting is a thing, and people seem to be complaining about it. It's like, well, why can't they be this race? It's, well, because canonically they're not. So,
Well, it's right. It's like, yeah. I mean, if you flip the example around and say, if you were doing a movie about the warring tribes of sub-Saharan Africa, just for example, and for some reason you were instructed to make sure that was multicultural in the cast, you wouldn't have any Caucasians as members of the tribe.
Right.
It
And
just
say
wouldn't make it. Just
well,
does. I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
right. Or like making a movie about the colonial ages and the people coming over on the ships are natives. And they're
right.
conquering the whites. It
I
doesn't.
mean,
You can't.
you couldn't hire Norwegians to play Native Americans. They're just not the same.
Right. So you
Right.
couldn't sell that. But since we're viewing everything from the current, social climate, it's like, oh yeah, we need to superimpose today's world on top of fantasy for some reason.
Right.
Fantasy
Right.
is
Well,
written in a time period.
Well, it is. And it depends on how complicated and detailed the world is, and in your worlds, and in Tolkien's world is very complicated and very detailed. And so the color of their hair and color of their skin, the writers of Rohan have a very specific. I mean, that you see cultural archetypes in all of these things.
Yeah.
And so to displace them, to toys with the authenticity of the work, and to me the art community is always talking about, and I don't represent the art community, but the authenticity of the work. And I think one of your bugaboos in the Lord of the Rings is being authentic, or you might say canonical, but I'd use the word authenticity.
Yeah.
I think it's really the same. It's not really the same thing, but it's close. That if it's going to be authentic, it ought to be authentic. So elves are meant to be, sort of very tall and thin
and fair is the word that he uses.
Fair of skin and hair.
But you know what?
Right?
So I don't mean to cut you off entirely, but just to that point,
All right. No worries.
I think they did a terrific job with the black elf. He's the best elf.
Yeah, right.
He is the best elf.
Yeah, it turns out he is.
And Galadriel
No,
sucks. Elrond sucks. Celebrimbor sucks. and I off the top of my head I can't remember the king of the elves name, and that's gonna drive me nuts. But I keep thinking Glorfindel, but that's Lord of the Rings. I think it starts with a G. Whatever. But he also sucks. And the Black Elf is the only one I like. And he looks...
I think elves...
Go ahead.
I was going to say elves have a certain intensity about them. And he certainly portrays that.
Well, one of the things he portrays is a control. Even though he's like in love with the human, right? He has that same emotion that like Arwen has, which is it's not that they're emotionless, it's not that they're one note, it's that they're regal with their emotions. So when they're happy, they pontificate a little bit, and when they're sad, they're really sad and really serious. But the elves, like, okay, so Elrond in the original Lord of the Rings movies gets mad sometimes, right? He gets a little mad, but it's muted. It's really muted. So like even when Gandalf is using the black speak in Rivendell, he's just like, never before has that been done here, Gandalf. And Gandalf's like, I don't care, I don't beg your pardon. And he's just like, ugh. But it's muted anger. And then you see his desperation at points, but he's very afraid for the end time of the elves. He has a reason to be that afraid. So when he's talking about them not being able to keep the ring here, and he's like, we don't have the power to fight the armies of Mordor and Isengard. He sounds desperate, not angry, right?
Right.
But Galadriel in Rings of Power is like perpetually angry, overly serious, and she's verbose in a way that sounds like Tolkien imitation. She is spewing lines that are meant to sound poetic, but they're really like simple metaphors and like aphorisms for life. It doesn't like it's like bad thoughts hollow the mind, don't fill it with guesswork. It's like yeah, but he thinks his family's dead, You know, elves aren't completely heartless. They know how to grieve.
Right.
So she's overly
Yeah,
serious.
It's interesting because I think you put your finger on something. Is elves are regal in their bearing,
Yeah.
right? They bear themselves like a royal family, and there occasionally are runts of the litter, just like the House of Windsor, um, right? But you look at that family and say, yep, that the best of them do exactly that. You know, just Queen Elizabeth II was very much that way. She had a very regal carriage, and she showed emotion, but it was usually just by smiling or waving, and not by being boisterous in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good example of how they carry themselves, not just emotionally but otherwise.
Yeah, and Galadriel's supposed to be that. She's like the most. She's described as like the most beautiful and elegant like thing in
And
like
she's not
all of Lord of the
elegant.
Rings.
She's not elegant at all in this
No,
one.
she's
You're
a
right.
she's a tomboy male protagonist wannabe, and that's part of the problem. Is that it's not she's a protagonist wannabe. She's a male protagonist wannabe.
Yeah, she's a Joan of Arc figure.
Yeah, but even like Joan of Arc was like, she's still a lady. This is so the problem is here with
Of course, she dressed in men's clothing.
no,
but that's
yeah, but
another-
I mean like, you know, there was, I don't know enough about Joan of Arc to make an argument, so I won't try. But okay, so here's my problem, right? Is that it's part of the same problem that I have with treat men and women exactly the same argument, is that we're not exactly the same. And men and women have different strengths, different character moments as people. And we tend towards different things. So in terms of the elves, I never felt like getting over their anger and their hatred was even a possible story arc for elves.
Right.
It's like, oh, get control of your emotions. It's like canonically they're supposed to be insanely in charge of their emotions.
Yeah. They're almost Spock figures, not quite, but almost.
Almost. They're very, you know, matter of fact about everything, and they know what they are, and they know they're going to live forever. And living forever carries a certain numbness.
Sure
And that's the point, is that you can't exist in the world if you're going to be that emotional and living forever, right? It doesn't work.
No,
Tolkien knew that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
This
It's one of the negatives of living forever is it dulls everything, because you've seen everything before, and you know you're going to see, so you're going to see it again, plus whatever else comes along.
Yeah, the thing is,
So nothing is a surprise anymore.
yeah. Now, I think there's an argument to be made, right? That we as people, if one of us was going to live forever, right? If we thought we were going to die and the rest of the people we know are going to die, and then we find out we're going to live forever, that's a bad thing, right? Because you're going to watch everybody we know die.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in a race of people, and this is the argument I think you could make, if you're in a race of people where no one ever dies, then that's not a concern. You'll always have your people with you. So grief is very real for them, and that's fine. She's sad about her brother and her husband dying or whatever. But, you know, also, you can't hold on to it if that's the thing. You still got other stuff.
Well, it's interesting though when you think about it. If you presuppose for your whole life that you and everybody around you is going to live forever, and they don't, that
can be a big letdown.
Increases the grief, because now you have to live forever without them. You're not going to live the next 30 years without them. You live forever without them.
But also, they make it seem like elves don't perceive time the same way, so
okay,
forever seems like nothing to them. And you know, the other part of it is that, it's, you know, there's a lot wrong with it fundamentally, but you know, I don't like how they portrayed her. And one of the big problems is, you know, that early on, the like right at the beginning, the brother is talking about, you know, the ship and the light, and she's like, how do I know the difference between the light in the sky and the light reflected on the water or whatever? How do I know whether I'm looking up or looking down? The sun didn't exist when Galadriel was a kid. I would just like to say that. They didn't look up to see light. They looked that way because they were looking at a big glowing tree.
There you go.
So the whole metaphor at the beginning with them talking about looking up at the light, yeah, they didn't look up at the light. They looked at the tree of Valinor, the trees of Valinor.
Right. Well, lot. I'll go back to my original point is that the basis upon which this works or doesn't work is the amount of knowledge that the audience has about the canon, right? And my presumption is that most of the audience has very little, if any, because I would say diehard fans are not generally. I haven't done a survey, but I would think diehard fans who have read the materials and the background materials won't be particularly happy because it's not authentic, right? And so it can never meet those expectations.
Well,
but to the masses, that's different.
But I don't. Does it appeal to the masses? I can't say. Right? I'm not in that position.
I don't know if it does. I don't know if it does or doesn't.
So the problem I would have if I didn't have this wealth of knowledge is that I would think it's flawed in terms of not telling me enough. For me, it's that they're saying the wrong things. But I know the information that could potentially fill out the answers. I don't know what it's like not to have any of it. And also, I feel like they're trying way too hard to be Lord of the Rings again. Like the human king of the Southlanders.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, it's Aragorn. Like, the lines are like the same. Galadriel's talking to him like she's freaking Arwen, being like, "Oh, you don't want to be king, but you need to be king. It's your destiny." And he's like, "No, I wouldn't make a good king because humans are bad, and I made mistakes, and I ran away from my destiny." It's like, oh, dude, it's just Aragorn again. Aragorn worked as Aragorn. It doesn't work as this schlub. He's not going to be the king of anything. If you know Lord of the Rings, you don't even have to know the Silmarillion. You know he's not the king. Because the Southlands becomes Mordor. It's... What is he going to be king of? Nothing. And if you watch the first 10 minutes of the Lord of the Rings movies, you know that the angry dude from Numenor becomes the king of men. You know that, and you know his son is the idiot who drops the ring. So that, which also makes it really hard to watch his scenes. I gotta be frank about that. Watching the scenes with Isildur, I'm just like, dude, you are such a bumbling asshat. You're making mistakes as a kid. You're going to continue to make mistakes until you get shot in the back with an arrow and you lose the ring. Good job. You suck. You're never going to have a good character arc because we know where it ends. You die in a river. So I have some problems with it, admittedly.
I can tell. I can absolutely tell. But my point is, and it's not a fallback position, it just is, that when you're commercializing a property like this, and you could point to hundreds of books, that have been made in the movies, and by the way, just an aside, I say this to whoever might ever listen to this, is drinking caffeinated beverages on a podcast that are going to make you belch is probably not a great idea.
I don't care. You think I care?
I know. Well, there you go. I'm just saying.
Have I been burping a lot? I know I burped like twice.
No, it only takes once or twice.
Well, I'm doing it back here. Did you hear it?
I did. Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Okay, my mic's picking up a little further than I thought.
Well, it's not a belch-proof mic.
No, it's not. Well, I'll be getting the Shure soon.
That's not. They don't call it a burp screen.
I'm gonna burp drinking anything. I got to stay hydrated.
Oh no, that's perfectly fine.
This is not keeping me hydrated.
This is no. In fact, it's probably the opposite if it has a lot of caffeine in it. So anyway, developing any commercial property like this is going to create issues. You can go all over the boards. The original Dune. The original Dune, the 1984 Dune movie, is a perfect example of trying to commercialize a very complicated, very quirky, intellectual property. And it for some people it worked horribly, and for others it was sort of entertaining. But but quirky, and I would be in that camp. So I found it entertaining.
Yeah.
And we always, by the way, just 10 seconds on it, people are today criticizing the special effects that were put together in 1984, given where we've been in the last 38 years. It makes no sense to do that reading backward. You have to, I've seen this in more and more, critiques when people, and it's not just Dune, it's other things where they look at something that was done in the 60s or 70s or even 80s, and they say, oh, this was so much better because the technical factors were so much better. Well, hello, in some sense you have to appreciate things for the time in which they were made. Oh, there you are.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you do have a full head of hair. I wasn't sure about that. The only thing I could see was your face and your your douche-makeies there.
Yeah.
In any case, it's I think that anytime you take a complicated property, try to make it you have to condense it, and then we've talked extensively, you and I, about the Game of Thrones and the TV versus the books. I have not read the books, but you have.
Yeah.
And the differences in just trying to sort through all that material, and then you get into the biases and the editorial choices, the creative choices that get made in making these things, because the net result is that it's got to be something people will watch.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you end up washing out things, or you eliminate arcs, or you bend arcs in a different direction because it suits your purpose, which ultimately is to sell something.
Well,
so
a part of the problem, I think, is that there aren't a lot of real writers, like passionate writers. Like, they're writers, but there aren't a lot of passionate creative writers in Hollywood. They tend more to be that they are hired to do a job, right? It works in the reverse of how I think it should work, right? They're hired to adapt something.
Oh, sure.
Rather than, oh, I adapted something, and then it doesn't get sourced out. So whatever you end up with from the writer you chose is what you get. And that's probably not the right way to do it. Where when you're looking at books, the ones that are good, a lot of the time, are the ones that succeed a lot. And those get adapted by lesser writers.
Well, can you imagine standing? Mom and I were at the Metropolitan Museum last week, and can you imagine? You've got a painting, right? A classical painting, beautifully done by a single artist 400 years ago, right? Very complicated brush strokes, treatment of color, and light, and then you get 3 or 4 artists together, and they're going to make an electronic version of this. And so you've got a committee figuring out how, and they're not going to render this literally pixel by pixel. They're going to render it in some way that includes their own take on it, right? And so suddenly you've got different opinions about what hue should be here and the treatment of that color. So you all of a sudden diverge. This is not a great, as I'm thinking about it, it's not a great example.
Well, no, it's a start in the right direction.
But some level, that's exactly what's happening.
But then you take out the committee, though. You get one of their opinions.
Well, ultimately that's what happens, right? The choice of screenwriter is the most important choice, and then it depends on how much latitude the screenwriter has and how much autonomy they have. Because if the producers, I'm not an expert in the movie business, I know enough to be dangerous, but the producers and the people who are spending money on this, and maybe to some extent the director as well, have got some influence, especially the director on site on very specific things. But you've got a screenwriter that's hired to take a book or 3 or 6 and adapt them. And now the Game of Thrones was actually a couple of people, a couple of guys who are trying to adapt this huge work. Right?
But they had George R.R. Martin helping them with the completed books.
So they had that advantage. That's
that's why the first 5 seasons were gold.
Yeah, until they diverged.
Right? Until they started writing it themselves. And then people realize, wow, these guys have no idea what plot structure or pacing are.
And that's, to your point, the passion was then gone.
Yeah. You took out the one who had investment in this world, and you made it a money thing. They got paid one way or the other. They just had to get it out there, and they'd already been greenlit through the end. So they had to get those scripts out. but then they're done. They don't need to be attached to
Yeah.
it. And
It's
then,
go ahead, please.
well, and then you have to take into account biases and motives, right? So directors and screenplay writers who have particular social motives and directives
Like
to
everything
achieve.
at Disney right now.
Yes, like She-Hulk, and
Oh,
I've only seen reviews of it, but it looks god awful.
yeah, I haven't
The
seen it.
CGI is abominable. It is an insult to my computer. I can't even, like, just look up a meme of it. You'll see how bad it is. It's horrible. She looks like claymation. Ugh. Sorry, I'm like disgusted by the CGI in that show.
Well, go ahead.
Early on, so I'll just give you an example from She-Hulk. Early on, they literally compare Hulk's struggles, and they try to like minimize them by having She-Hulk say, "I'm good at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you." She says that to Hulk, and her examples are that she gets catcalled in the street. Men tell her she's bad at her job, and so she says that's her metric for her controlling her anger on a daily basis. When the Hulk almost killed himself saving half the universe, he was hunted by the government for 20 years actively. He had to go hide in a third world country and be a doctor to sick children.
That's a horror show.
He knows he's dangerous and actively, like, accidentally kills people. So if he doesn't control his anger, he feels like a serial killer. This dude has reasons to be angry.
Sure.
And his secret is that he's angry all the time. That's an immense control of anger if he's just constantly pissed off. And yet this lawyer who clearly she gets angry while she's shouting this at him, by the way. I would just like to say that. She turns into She-Hulk shouting this at him. And I think that's supposed to counterpoint it, but it's like, but this is your character, is somebody who thinks that. So if you don't fix this by the end, what is your plot arc? And they really don't fix it by the end. She's just horrible the whole show. And they also managed to rope in a bunch of other MCU characters and ruin them too. It's dumb, but there's all these social motives behind everything that's going on at Disney. And I get it, right now social justice sells, but it's not a reason to absolutely butcher story structure just for sake of selling something on sort of the meme of social justice. If you're actually passionate about human rights, that's fine, but token diversity hires and small tick boxes in diversity hires don't make the point. That's not a change to the systems that are inherently flawed. All it is saying, hey, look, we acknowledge that black people exist. That's not changing anything. You gave one or two people a job, and they're already rich.
Well, the interesting part of all of this is that these are companies, these are corporations that are in the business of making money.
Yeah.
And if you can peddle whatever you want, however subtly or not so subtly that you peddle it. The fact is, if the public doesn't buy it, you're going to stop peddling it because you have to. Because at the end of the day, you got to make money. And if you have a lot of flops, and Disney has had some, because of kind of the stuff they're putting in there, I'm not even going to characterize it. That's just not saleable, right? Yeah. The fact is, the same warriors, whether they're social justice or something else, that say guns are bad, continue to make movies where guns are used constantly, where all they do is shoot each other up. And so
guns are bad, but action is good. Action sells.
Action, if it involves a gun in a movie, it's not a real gun, I guess, unless you're Alec Baldwin. Oops, I'm sorry I said that.
That wasn't his fault.
Well, okay. Except that one has to take personal responsibility when one has a real weapon in one's hand.
Oh no, he absolutely does. I just, I wouldn't put the immediate blame on him. He's partially to blame, but
I don't even want to go there. I just thought it was, but
we gotta poke the bear a little bit.
I don't want to hear Alec Baldwin. He won't anymore, but I wouldn't want to have heard in past. It would have been very hypocritical for him to say anything about guns, because he's promulgating them by making movies. He's made a lot of them where people get shot by guns that he's got. And I don't mean that in regard to this tragedy. It's an absolute tragedy. But my whole point is that when you make a product that is so laden with let's say ideas that don't fit with your audience, trying to manipulate your future audience, I suppose,
Yeah.
people don't buy your products, and that so it can be a self-correcting kind of situation. You only make them for so long,
Yeah.
and I think we've seen some of that where you've had some colossal failures, and She-Hulk would. I don't know how much money they put into it, but
Probably a
it's
lot.
yeah. I mean, there was. I think Captain Marvel. Some people yelled about that early on. I watched the movie and I thought it was pretty entertaining, but I'm pretty easy to please.
It was an
Um,
entertaining movie. She's just terrible.
oh well, yeah. I guess that's well. It's okay. I'm just going to leave that there because I don't disagree with that. It's not. I don't think it's arguable,
It's so
but it's an entertaining movie.
let me sort of posture this argument from the other side, because as someone who's, I'm all about story, right?
So you said.
On a one, like, on just a, in a vacuum, Captain Marvel's not a bad movie. The movie isn't bad. The character kind of sucks. She's kind of problematic. Not because she's a woman. That has nothing to do with it.
Right.
The
No,
problem
I think that's true.
is that they dial her up to 45. And then they realize, wait, we don't have a villain who's at 45. So they dial her back down to 3. Right. She can torpedo through a spaceship and blow up in the entirety of Thanos' army, but she can't win a fist fight with him. Come on. He doesn't even have the Infinity Gauntlet.
This is the problem.
So that's more of a problem with
have
Endgame, by the way, not Captain Marvel. So
right. But it's true. We've talked about this in the magic universe, is that the amplitude of the magic seems to change as a writer's convenience.
yeah.
Right. You get Superman had this problem too with you play out Superman's power to the point that he can eliminate the entire universe if he wants to.
Oh, there's a version of him in the comic books, I'm pretty sure, that's just called Superman God.
Yeah, right.
I'm pretty sure he's like the most powerful being in the comic books or something.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy who, I think it was in the original TV show, the black and white from the 1950s,
Where in the world?
where he goes and spins the world back the other way, so the time goes backwards, which is silly, but
Yeah.
so be it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not really
And
how
he
time works.
No, but in those days he could also make his atoms so thin that he could walk into solid matter, through the atoms, because he could do that too.
And turn into
So
a
he's not only
gas.
He's sort of, yeah, sort of. So he's not only almost infinitely dense, but also infinitely not so dense. Right.
Ugh.
So, but the problem is that when you deal in hyperbole, right, when you deal in things that have to outdo the last thing, eventually you get to infinity, and there's nothing beyond it.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with like Dragon Ball Z. It's the same problem. That's why people have sort of made the comparison. It's like, who would win, Superman or Goku? In Dragon Ball Z, the main character is at the point where his villains are gods of destruction from alternate universes that have just a little contest, just a little game, right? And whoever wins, their universe isn't destroyed. And Goku fights in that tournament with beings that can snap and destroy multiple existences. So, the stairs get increasingly steep. And when you're looking at like a parabolic curve for power scaling, you end up making conflict irrelevant, because you have to scale it up. So when you compare episode 1 conflict to episode 99 conflict, one is, one plank wide, and the other is the size of the observable universe. That's the comparative
Okay, can we just stop
scale.
there? Can we just stop there for a moment and point to the fact that you said one plank wide? right? I'm not going to explain it to anybody who happens to listen to this, but that is an interesting way to say it, because of course one plank would be the minimum distance between 2 points,
Yes.
right? Like distance. Yeah, it's interesting that you said that.
Well, I
Okay,
had to go as big and as small as I could.
well, there you go. There you
So,
go.
yeah.
I'm impressed by that, and you should be impressed that I caught that.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And by the way, if I didn't know what it was, I would never have admitted it.
oh, no, of course not.
I wouldn't. The last thing I would do is say, "One plank? What does that mean? You're talking about a plank of wood, or would
Yeah.
it be Max Planck?"
Max Planck. Okay, so you know what? I launched a video on YouTube, which
Yeah.
was me talking about hard versus soft magic systems, because we talked about that a little bit last week.
Yeah, we did. Right.
And I offered in the video, I said, if anybody wants me to go a little bit more in depth on Harry Potter, I will.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, since that video was hosted on Twitch, it's probably gone. But I am still willing to do that. But I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that superheroes should probably work on a hard system, but they don't. Fantasy doesn't have to just be like magic systems, right? The hard versus soft magic system works for comic books. It works for sci-fi, because sci-fi is just it should just be like sort of a hard magic system is really what you're developing, because it's technology and science that's not real. So it is sort of your magic. You've put a hard system in place. You have rules that you can follow. Superheroes, a lot of them don't. Like Batman does. He has to follow the normal rules of technology. So you kind of have to be able to follow what he's doing. Superman, a lot of the time, just defies logic, and more of the MCU is defying logic. Have you watched the new Doctor Strange?
Yeah.
Why does he summon a floating demon cat head?
I don't know.
To bite a car in half? What is that? I don't understand his magic in that movie. It's like
that's that's Green Lantern magic. Remember the movie Green Lantern?
Well,
that's Green Lantern
like
magic.
the comic, but I like Green Lantern because anything he can think up, he has the willpower to make it. But it's limited because it's still a construct that can be broken. But yes, Doctor Strange has turned into Green Lantern. He's summoning saw blades. He's summoning giant demon cat heads, and all this weird stuff. That movie was so problematic for me. It wasn't a not it was an entertaining movie, but it made no sense.
Oh, it was a jumble. It was it was like they put about a dozen different things into a blender or food processor, and I can't say a blender because it didn't blend. It was just a lot of pieces, I thought, of stuff.
Oh, they put oil and dish soap and water and blood and honey and
glitter
and
demon cat heads. Yeah, for sure.
So none of it blended.
No question about that.
And then you ended up with lumps of solid bacon fat floating in your milkshake. So, it was not like I enjoyed it as a wild ride, but I don't enjoy fat floating in my milkshake. Like I said, it's
right.
It's like you're trying to take the movie in, you're trying to choke it down, and it's like, oh, what was that? And then it's stuck in your teeth for the next week. I'm probably gonna clip that and put it on YouTube Shorts. That little bit right there.
I do like that.
I would like to go back through this. And that was one thing I did want to mention, is that I'm gonna try to start doing YouTube Shorts. I'm gonna go away from TikTok. I was gonna do Book Talk, but TikTok sucks. They steal your data and they sell it to China, or it just goes to China. I don't want that, so I'm gonna use YouTube Shorts. But I figured, if anything entertaining came up in today's conversation, I could just clip it and put it up there.
Well, that's really what we're trying to do, is generate content. It doesn't have to be this. It could be part of this.
Yeah. This is a good content farm.
There may be quips you can pull out. You put a little graphic with it, or you could even shadow yourself.
Yeah.
Say, here's what we said about. You could whatever.
Go watch the whole thing.
Yeah, but here's the best part. Here's the filet mignon.
And I'm gonna onboard Katie, and I'm gonna use her to thirst trap all the simps.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the goal. I do have to pitch it to her that way. I think she'll be okay with me pitching it that way. Be like, hey, how you doing? You know, my primary demographic is men from 26 to 42, and they're all thirsty.
And I don't mean thirst.
What's really good bait for a simp trap? So would you do that for me? Would you be the simp bait? Let's prey on desperation, shall we?
What the hell? I don't think she's dating anybody right now.
It's not that she's gonna get anybody out of the parasocial crap.
Oh no, hell no! You wouldn't want that.
No. But you know what? It's a good way to get eyes on stuff.
Absolutely.
And she enjoys being sort of a public face, right? She enjoys the social aspect of this, where I don't. I really don't. I would rather not be the face of a platform. I think I'm too problematic. I think my opinions are generally unliked. I'm very problematic. But you know what? I have a unique perspective, and if anybody wants to hear it, that's fine by me. But, I don't feel like marketing myself. I could market her. But
not a bad thing.
No, that's the way the internet works, right? And you know what? It's part of this thing. It's like, I've admitted that if I were gonna post any videos of Fabian, it would be for a reason. I would post something innocent and not really private, and I would do it to draw the eyes of people who love kids. But
there are a lot of those.
Yeah, I'm not gonna broadcast mine or his life in its entirety because I find that kind of sick socially.
I mean, unlike a certain sister of yours that posts everything
that
your kids do.
I'm not gonna be terribly critical of it on here, as far as she's concerned. But you know what?
Of course not.
It's one of those things. It's like looking down the line, having been somebody who was severely bullied in elementary and middle school.
Mm-hmm.
That's a recipe for bullying. If you were 3 years old and you did something kind of funny but hugely embarrassing, like you got into the trash and you smeared dog poop all over the walls, your parents might find it funny and sort of broadcast it socially, like, oh my goodness, look at what my son did. And then you get into 6th grade and somebody's like, hey, I was looking on the internet, I found your mom. Did you smear poop on the walls when you were 4? Dude, you were way too old for that. When was the last time you wet the bed? Yesterday? So it's a recipe for bullying. Your whole life is broadcast. You have no privacy.
Yeah.
And privacy
It's almost like there's a movie like that.
The Truman Show?
Which is, it's obviously it's more intense and more intrusive.
Not that much.
Right, there's sort of an element to it.
If you look at the influencer families, that's what they're like.
That's what they do. That's exactly right.
And so that's exactly my point. And then if you're the person who is the target of it, which these kids don't have a choice.
Right.
They're going to wake up like Truman when they're in middle school or high school and be like, oh my God, my life's been a sideshow.
And the internet is forever.
Yep. At least it's not on the blockchain.
This is true.
Let's hope it doesn't get there. I hate the blockchain. I think it's horrible. People trying to put medical accreditations on there, and
well, it's yeah. I guess I have no real comment on that. I'm more and more in the camp of I want value that's tangible.
Well, yeah.
I'd rather than this idea of NFTs,
digital scarcity.
Whatever they are. I just don't get it because it's that you flip. There's two parts to it. One is you flip a switch and it's off, right? You have no electricity and it's just gone. And number 2 is on there. You'll never convince me that it can't be manipulated or stolen.
No, digital scarcity is invented. It's like the diamond. It's like the whole diamond market. They had 100 times the number of diamonds that they thought they could effectively sell in 1 year at good price. So they said over the next 100 years, we are going to meter out our supply of diamonds from 1 week of diamond mining. And we're going to make a huge campaign. And we're going to make it so that every one of these diamonds is worth as much as the entire haul would have been. if we sold it all at once. And they've made what, trillions of dollars?
I don't know what the number is, but it's a big business. It's the second largest business in Israel, for example, is the diamond trade. I think their top three businesses are tourism, agriculture, believe it or not, and the diamond trade. They're a big agricultural country. You know, somebody's got to grow olives, and they're Mediterranean. Parts of Israel are Mediterranean, part are desert. So
we need our feta cheese.
Feta. You know,
feta cheesy Alfredo.
Amen. So yeah.
Well, we are a little over time here, so
we're wound down.
Yeah, we've.
I'm seeing your guitar back on your wall. That reminds me, you have a guitar here yet.
Yes, I have to bring it over to my best friend Joe's house.
Good enough, no problem at all.
There's also a cello or two in the basement that need to go, and there is a saxophone and a violin.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Sorry.
Good enough.
But I'll get it done. Worries. He's hard to get a hold of.
No worries at all. It can stay here until you get it moved. No problem at all.
Yep.
All right. Well, listen, it's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's good talking to you too. And I'll be around tomorrow relatively early at the house.
Okay.
Fabian has a doctor's appointment, so that's at 9:40. Right. So I'll probably be at the house around 10:40, probably, with an angry son, because he'll probably have a shot.
Okay.
So right. Yeah, but I will see you tomorrow. Cool. Thank you everybody who decides to come and listen. If you do, we will be on next Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Maybe not 8 o'clock sharp, but around there. And I hope you had a good night. And God bless.
God bless you too, bud.